You are obsessed with your legacy. You spend your life crafting a persona, chasing status, and worrying about how you will be remembered, all while terrified of the silence that follows your departure. But here is the brutal reality. The world will forget you, not in 100 years, but within a generation. Your professional achievements, your social standing, and your curated online image will dissolve into the noise of time. It sounds nihilistic, but it is actually the most liberating realization you will ever have. When you finally accept that you don't matter to the universe, you are finally free to live for yourself. We live in an age of hypervisibility. Through social media and corporate culture, we are under the constant pressure to build a brand and leave a mark. We have been conditioned to believe that our existence requires justification, and that this justification comes from the approval or remembrance of others. We suffer from a modern iteration of what Stoics called vainglory, the irrational attachment to the opinion of others. We are terrified of being forgotten, so we spend our limited, finite lives performing for an audience that is, in reality, just as self-absorbed and distracted as we are. Stoic wisdom, however, acts as a surgical intervention for the modern ego. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, constantly reminded himself of the oblivion that awaits us all. He didn't do this to be depressed. He did it to calibrate his focus. From the perspective of modern American psychology, specifically terror management theory, our obsession with legacy is a defense mechanism used to suppress the existential terror of our own mortality. By clinging to the fantasy that we will live on through our accomplishments, we escape the discomfort of our fragility. But this escape comes at a massive cost. It keeps us in a state of perpetual anxiety, enslaved to the expectations of a world that is fundamentally indifferent to our survival. This video is an invitation to dismantle that anxiety. We aren't going to talk about how to achieve immortality through success. We are going to talk about the radical peace found in accepting your own irrelevance. By stripping away the need to be remembered, you stop living for the after and finally start living for the now. It's time to stop the performance and start the practice. The human mind is a storytelling machine, but it is a machine with a fatal design flaw. It is obsessed with the idea that the story must have a permanent ending. We are born into a world where we are taught, from the earliest age, that we must do something with our lives. We are encouraged to build, to achieve, to leave a mark, and to strive for a legacy. This impulse feels noble, but if you look at it through the lens of cold, psychological analysis, you will see that it is actually a pathology. It is a desperate, irrational attempt to cheat the finality of death by projecting our existence into a future where we no longer exist. The pathology of legacy begins with the ego's fundamental delusion, the belief that you are a main character in the cosmic drama. The human brain is capable of thinking about its own future, which is a massive evolutionary advantage. But this ability comes with a terrifying side effect, the awareness of our own inevitable cessation. When you are 7 years old, you might not grasp this, but by the time you reach adulthood, the shadow of mortality is always present. To cope with the existential terror that we are temporary, fragile, and ultimately insignificant biological events, we create the narrative self. We build an identity that is tied to things outside of us. Our jobs, our social media followings, our bank accounts, our professional achievements, and our children. We convince ourselves that as long as these things continue, we continue. This is what psychologists refer to as terror management theory. It suggests that our culture, our society, and our individual pursuit of legacy are essentially buffers that protect us from the unbearable weight of death awareness. We build monuments, whether literal statues or figurative professional reputations, because we are terrified of the idea that we will be wiped from the slate of existence without a trace. We want to believe that the world will look different because we were here. We want to believe that there is a me that survives the end of my biology. This creates a state of chronic, low-level anxiety that dictates almost every decision we make. It forces us to live our lives as a performance for an audience that will eventually stop watching. Consider the pathology of the modern professional. You see someone who has dedicated their entire life to climbing a corporate ladder, sacrificing their health, their relationships, and their sanity for the sake of a title. If you ask them why they are doing it, they will tell you they want to build something, but what they are actually building is a shield against the insignificance of their own existence. They believe that if they get the title, they will have mattered. But when they reach the top, the anxiety doesn't disappear. It just gets louder, because they realize that the title is just a label, and the company will replace them within 6 months of their departure. The legacy is a ghost. It is a vapor. And the pathology of the legacy seeker is that they are so obsessed with building the tombstone that they forget to actually live in the house. This obsession also destroys your capacity for presence. How can you be fully present with your spouse, your children, or your own thoughts if you are constantly measuring their value against the yardstick of legacy? If you treat your life as a project to be immortalized, you are never actually in your life. You are always hovering above it, looking at it through a lens, wondering how it will be perceived by others. You become a spectator of your own existence. You start to view your daily experiences not as things to be enjoyed, but as material for the story you are telling the world. You are trading your only real asset, the conscious experience of the present moment, for the currency of an imagined future memory. The Stoics, particularly Marcus Aurelius, understood this pathology better than anyone. He lived at the pinnacle of power, as the emperor of the known world, and yet he spent his nights writing reminders to himself about how quickly he would be forgotten. He wrote about the famous names of the past generals, kings, philosophers who were once the center of everyone's attention and were now nothing more than a name in a book, or, more often, completely erased. He wasn't doing this to be depressing. He was doing this to practice psychological liberation. He was constantly reminding himself that the opinion of the future was not a valid metric for the value of the present. He understood that the only thing that mattered was his character, his actions, and his focus in the immediate moment. When you attach your worth to your legacy, you are handing the remote control of your nervous system over to strangers. You are essentially saying that your peace of mind is contingent upon the memory of people who haven't even been born yet. Think about how absurd that is. You are stressed about how you will be remembered by someone who doesn't exist, in a context you will not be there to see, and at a time when your own consciousness has long since evaporated. The pathology of legacy turns you into a slave to a phantom. It keeps you in a state of agitation, always wondering if you are doing enough, if you are being impressive enough, and if you are being sufficiently significant. The antidote to this pathology is not to stop working or to stop caring about your life. It is to change the why. You can build, you can create, and you can achieve, but you must do it because the action itself is virtuous, not because you are trying to buy immortality. You do the work because it is the right thing to do today. You love your family because they are here today. You pursue your craft because it is an expression of your humanity today. When you shift your focus from the after to the now, the anxiety starts to evaporate. You stop looking for your value in the reflection of the future, and you start finding your value in the integrity of your actions in the present. This is the radical freedom of accepting your own irrelevance. There is a deep, quiet power in knowing that nobody will care that you died. It doesn't mean your life is meaningless. It means your life is yours. It is not an artifact for the museum of history. It is a raw, immediate, and intimate experience. When you stop worrying about the legacy, you stop trying to curate the story and start living the life. You find that you have a tremendous amount of energy that was previously being spent on the performance of your own life. You can finally rest. You can finally be honest about who you are, without the pressure of having to be significant. The tragedy of the legacy seeker is that they spent their life trying to be a noun, an achievement, a name, a reputation, when they were always meant to be a verb. You are not a statue, you are a flow of action, thought, and feeling. You are a process that is occurring right now. When you cling to the idea of a legacy, you are trying to turn yourself into a statue, and in doing so, you stop the flow. You start to stagnate. You become rigid, defensive, and anxious, because you are trying to protect a static image against the relentless erosion of time. But if you let go of the image, you become fluid. You become capable of anything. You become fully present, fully alive, and fully at peace with the fact that you are just a passing ripple in the stream of time. This path requires a high level of mental discipline. Every day, your ego will try to bring you back to the pathology. It will whisper, "But what if they don't remember you?" Or, "But what if this doesn't amount to anything?" In those moments, you have to be ready with the Stoic response. It doesn't matter. Not because you are failing, but because you are succeeding at the only thing that actually matters, the discipline of your own mind. You are proving that you don't need the world to validate your existence in order for it to be real. You are proving that you are big enough to occupy your own life without needing to fill the world with your shadow. This is the ultimate maturity. It is the ability to walk into a room, do your work, contribute your part, and then leave without needing to be the last one remembered. It is the ability to create something, share it, and then let it go, knowing that its shelf life is not the measure of your worth. It is the ability to live a life that is so deeply rooted in the present that the thought of the future is not a source of dread, but just a blank, quiet space. When you stop caring about your legacy, you finally start living your life. You stop being a performer for a ghost audience, and you become a participant in the only thing that ever exists: the beautiful, fleeting, and utterly sufficient reality of now. Nobody will care that you died, and that is the greatest news you could ever receive. It means you are free. The Stoic approach to existence is not a call to sadness, it is a call to proportion. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, occupied the most powerful position in the known world. He was the center of an empire that people lived and died for, yet his personal journals, now known as meditations, are filled with a recurring, obsessive theme: the utter, total oblivion that awaits him and everyone else. He was not writing to be gloomy, he was writing to maintain his sanity. He recognized that the human ego is a distorting lens, constantly magnifying our current problems, our current status, and our current importance to an absurd degree. To counteract this, he utilized a set of psychological exercises designed to shrink the ego until it fit back into the reality of the universe. The primary tool in this Stoic arsenal is what we might call the oblivion exercise. Aurelius would regularly visualize the vast expanse of time, the billions of years before his birth, and the billions of years after his death. He would visualize the collapse of empires, the forgetting of names, and the fading of even the most legendary figures into total obscurity. In his mind, he would watch the future generations, who would also be preoccupied with their own fleeting dramas, completely unaware that he had ever existed. This is not a meditation on defeat, it is a meditation on freedom. When you truly internalize the fact that in a few short generations, your name, your face, your achievements, and your struggles will be utterly unknown, you are liberated from the tyranny of the present. Think about the spotlight effect. This is a documented psychological phenomenon where we believe that people are paying much more attention to us than they actually are. We walk into a room and feel like everyone is watching our outfit, our performance, or our mistakes. We are convinced that our current embarrassment or our current triumph is a major event in the lives of those around us. But the Stoic perspective cuts through this delusion. If you are going to be forgotten by history, you are certainly being forgotten by the people in the room right now. They are not thinking about you, they are thinking about themselves. They are preoccupied with their own egos, their own legacies, and their own terrors. When you realize that you are not the protagonist of their stories, the pressure to perform vanishes. This brings us to the Stoic practice of the view from above. Aurelius would often instruct himself to visualize his life from a high vantage point, looking down at his activities, his battles, and his frustrations from a cosmic distance. From that height, the political intrigues of the Roman Senate looked like the movements of ants. The accumulation of wealth looks like the gathering of twigs. The desire for fame looks like a child's game. When you apply this to your own life, the immediate stressors that ruin your day start to lose their weight. That difficult conversation at work, that slight from a colleague, that mistake you made, they are not cosmic tragedies. They are small, temporary movements in a vast, indifferent theater. The oblivion exercise helps you detach from the view of others. We suffer so much because we grant other people the power to define our value. We worry about what they think, how they rank us, and whether they remember us. But if those people are also heading toward oblivion, if they are also just temporary ripples in the stream of time, why would their opinion matter? To worry about the judgment of others is to worry about the judgment of someone who will, in the blink of a cosmic eye, be gone. The Stoic realizes that the only opinion that matters is their own, and even that is subject to the scrutiny of virtue. You are not performing for a legacy. You are performing for the only thing that actually exists, the standard of your own character in this current moment. This is why the Stoics spoke so often of living in accordance with nature. Nature is indifferent to fame. A tree doesn't strive to be remembered, it simply grows. A river doesn't strive to be famous, it simply flows. The Stoic aims for the same level of integrity. They want to be like the emerald that keeps its color, regardless of whether anyone is there to admire it. When you internalize this, you reach a state of deep, quiet dignity. You do your work, you help your neighbor, you act with justice, and you treat others with kindness not because you want a statue built in your honor, but because those are the actions of a rational, virtuous human being. You are the emerald. The fame is the external decoration that you no longer need. The pathology of the modern age is that we are constantly trying to be somebody. We are obsessed with the idea that our existence needs to leave a mark. But look at the history of humanity. How many people have left a mark? A fraction of a percent. The overwhelming, crushing reality of human history is that the vast, vast majority of humans who have ever lived have been completely and totally forgotten. If you were to adopt the modern pathology, you would have to conclude that 99.99% of all human life was a failure. But that is absurd. Those people lived, they loved, they suffered, they laughed, they raised families, and they experienced the world. Their lives were real, even if they were unrecorded. Their existence was complete, even if it was unremembered. The oblivion exercise allows you to embrace your own obscurity. It allows you to say, I will be forgotten, and that is perfectly fine. It is a relief, not a defeat. It means you don't have to carry the burden of the world's expectations. You don't have to be the savior, the legend, or the icon. You can just be. You can occupy your space, do your duty, and find your joy without needing to make a scene. You find that the fame you were chasing was actually a trap that would have forced you to live a life tailored to the needs of the crowd. By choosing obscurity, you are choosing the freedom to live a life tailored to the needs of your own soul. This does not lead to passivity. It leads to a much more focused, intense way of living. When you know that you are not going to be a legend, you stop wasting your time on the big moves that are designed to impress others. You start focusing on the small moves that provide real value. You spend more time with your family, you commit more deeply to your work, and you cultivate a more vibrant inner life. You become more radical in your choices because you no longer fear the judgment of the history books. You realize that you are the only one who is ever going to know the full truth of your life, so you might as well make that truth something you can respect. The practice of the oblivion exercise should be a daily habit. In the morning, take a moment to look at the sky and imagine your life as a single breath in the history of the universe. In the evening, look back at the day and imagine it as a single frame in a movie that is being played at a speed beyond your comprehension. Notice how the urgency of your problems fades. Notice how the need for approval softens. Notice how the fear of being forgotten feels more like a weight being lifted off your shoulders. You are not losing your life, you are gaining it back from the phantoms of your own ego. This is the path of the philosopher king, regardless of your actual job. It is the path of someone who stands in the center of the world, fully engaged, fully present, but entirely detached from the need for external confirmation. You are no longer living for the obituary. You are living for the experience. You are no longer living for the memory. You are living for the moment. And because you are not living for the memory, you are finally free to be as bold, as honest, and as authentic as you have always wanted to be. You have finally reached the point where you don't care that you will be forgotten because you are too busy enjoying the fact that you are currently alive. This is the ultimate Stoic victory, the freedom that is found in the total, fearless acceptance of your own oblivion. Amor fati, the love of one's fate, is perhaps the most misunderstood and radical tool in the entire Stoic toolkit. It is often mistaken for a passive, submissive acceptance of whatever happens, a kind of rolling over for the world. But in reality, it is the exact opposite. It is an act of supreme, psychological defiance. To love your fate is not to say that everything that happens is good in a conventional sense. It is to say that everything that happens is necessary, and therefore, it is the raw material you must use to build your character. It is the final abandonment of the victim mentality. When you practice amor fati, you stop demanding that the universe align with your preferences and start demanding that your preferences align with the reality of the universe. The struggle to live in the present is essentially a struggle against the ego's desire to be elsewhere. We are constantly trying to bargain with reality. If we are in pain, we bargain for relief. If we are in a state of discomfort, we bargain for convenience. We spend our lives in a state of, if only I had more time, if only I had more resources, if only this person were different, if only my circumstances were better. This if only is the death of the present. It turns the current moment into a waiting room for a better one. Amor fati is the antidote to the if only. It is the iron-willed decision to declare, this is what is happening, and therefore, this is what I need to work with. When you fully commit to amor fati, you reclaim an immense amount of cognitive energy. Think about how much of your day is spent in the resistance phase, the mental chatter, where you complain about the weather, the traffic, the difficult person, or the unexpected setback. That resistance is the pathology of legacy in a different form. You are resisting the present because you want your legacy, your story, to look different. You want your story to be one of constant, frictionless progress. But that is a fairy tale. Real life is a series of frictions, and by resisting them, you turn yourself into a brittle, anxious mess. By loving them, you turn yourself into a force that can integrate anything into its own growth. This is the bridge to the Stoic present. The Stoics were not obsessed with mindfulness as a way to feel good. They were obsessed with it as a way to be accurate. To be truly present is to see the situation with total, unvarnished clarity. Most of us cannot see the present because we are wearing the spectacles of our expectations. We see the situation through the filter of how it should be. Amor fati removes those glasses. It forces you to look at the harsh, inconvenient, or even painful reality and acknowledge it as the truth. And because it is the truth, it is the only place where effective action can occur. You cannot act on a fantasy. You can only act on the reality. Therefore, to love your fate is to love the reality that provides the only viable path to your own self-overcoming. Consider the difference in energy between a person who is getting through a crisis and a person who is engaging with it. The one who is getting through is trying to minimize the damage, keep their head down, and wait for the situation to change. They are exhausted because their goal is to resist the reality of the crisis. The one who is engaging is treating the crisis as a set of variables to be managed, a problem to be solved, or a test to be passed. They are active, alert, and focused. They are not asking for the situation to be different. They are asking how they can be better within the situation. This is the difference between living as a passenger of fate and living as the captain of your own response. This leads us to the fundamental Stoic shift, the move from an external locus of control to an internal one. You cannot control the event, but you have absolute sovereignty over your response. If you view your fate as something that happens to you, you are a victim. If you view your fate as something that is yours, as the specific training ground provided to you by the universe, you are the master. Every setback, every failure, and every moment of oblivion is an opportunity to prove your own virtue. Can you be patient in the face of delay? Can you be fair in the face of injustice? Can you be courageous in the face of danger? If the answer is yes, then the event was not a setback at all. It was a catalyst. The reason most people avoid this is that it requires you to give up the safety of being a victim. It is much easier to be hurt by the world than it is to take responsibility for your own character. If you are a victim, you have an excuse for your anger, your laziness, and your mediocrity. If you have amor fati, you have no excuses. Everything that happens is your material. Everything that happens is your chance to shine. You are no longer waiting for the conditions to be perfect before you start your real life. You are deciding that the current, messy, imperfect conditions are exactly what you need to become the person you are capable of being. To integrate this into your daily life, you have to practice the reframing of the setback. When something goes wrong, when you get a negative piece of feedback, when you lose a client, when a plan fails, stop for a second. Instead of jumping to the reaction of annoyance or despair, ask yourself, how can I love this? This is not about liking it. It's not about finding it pleasant. It is about saying, this has happened, and because it has happened, I now have the chance to practice X, Y, or Z. It is a cold, rational, and ultimately empowering reframe. It changes the dynamic from a tragedy that is happening to you into a challenge that you are taking on. This state of being, the state of amor fati, is the only way to avoid the future trap. As long as you are waiting for a better fate, you are not living. You are holding your breath. Amor fati forces you to exhale. It forces you to drop the shoulders, look at the situation, and engage with the reality right now. You stop trying to manipulate the future and start focusing on the quality of your engagement with the present. You realize that the quality of your life is not determined by what happens to you, but by the excellence of the character you bring to what happens to you. This is the Stoic present. It is not a dreamy, meditative state. It is an active, militant, and highly focused state of engagement. It is the clarity of the surgeon, the calm of the sailor, and the focus of the architect. It is the ability to look at the wreckage of a plan and say, "This is mine, and I will build something from it." It is the ability to look at the loneliness of your own life and say, "This is mine, and I will use it to strengthen my independence." It is the ability to look at the prospect of your own death and say, "This is mine, and I will use it to make my life meaningful." This is how you build a life that needs no memorial. You don't need a statue because the life itself was the statue. The way you lived, the way you loved your fate, the way you stayed present, the way you acted with virtue regardless of the external recognition, that is the monument. And the best part is, you don't need anyone to visit that monument. You don't need anyone to remember that monument. You lived it. You breathed it. You were the monument. And in the moment of your final breath, you will be the only one who needs to know that you gave it everything you had, that you accepted everything that came your way, and that you remained fully, beautifully, and fiercely yourself until the very end. Amor fati is not just a philosophy, it is the practice of being so fully alive that the question of legacy becomes entirely, hilariously irrelevant. You are free. Now, go live like it. Building a life that needs no memorial is the final, ultimate defiance of the ego's need for immortality. It is the transition from a life spent crafting a reputation to a life spent crafting a character. When we speak of a memorial, we are not just talking about tombstones or statues. We are talking about the entire apparatus of external validation, the resumes, the social media feeds, the status markers, and the desperate attempts to be remembered by a world that is fundamentally programmed to forget. A life that needs no memorial is one that is so deeply, authentically lived that it requires no external monument to justify its existence. It is a life that is complete within itself, a circle that starts and ends in the present moment, without the need for an exit ramp into the future. The first step in building this life is to understand the difference between virtue and vanity. Vanity is the pursuit of recognition. Virtue is the pursuit of excellence for its own sake. When you perform an act, whether it is raising a child, building a business, or writing a book, the ego immediately begins to ask, "Who will know I did this? How will this impact my reputation? Will this be my lasting mark?" These are the whispers of vanity, and they are the sounds of your peace being eroded. To build a life that needs no memorial, you must silence those whispers. You must learn to derive satisfaction from the quality of the act itself, rather than the external consequence of the act. You must become the kind of person who is happy to do good work in the dark, knowing that the work is enough. This requires a radical shift in your internal reward system. We have been trained to associate success with visibility. If nobody sees it, we feel like it didn't happen. If nobody likes it, we feel like it was a failure. Building a life that needs no memorial means retraining your brain to value the internal reward. When you act with integrity, when you work with discipline, and when you love with sincerity, you should experience a sense of completion. The action itself should be the arrival. If you are constantly looking for the +1 of external praise, you are admitting that the action was not, by itself, enough. To need no memorial is to believe that your own standard of virtue is the only yardstick that matters. This is a path of extreme psychological independence. It makes you unmanageable by the crowd. If you do not need their validation, you cannot be bought, you cannot be shamed, and you cannot be steered by the shifting winds of public opinion. You become an autonomous unit of existence. This is the ultimate freedom that the Stoics were writing about. When you are no longer competing for the memory of the world, you can actually see the world for what it is. You can see the beauty of the ordinary. You can see the profound value in the quiet, unrecorded moments that make up the vast majority of our lives. You stop treating your life like a product to be sold, and start treating it like an experience to be savored. Building this life also involves the practice of giving away the credit. In every project you work on, every relationship you nurture, and every contribution you make to your community, practice the discipline of letting others take the lead, take the thanks, or take the glory. This is not out of weakness. It is out of a position of immense strength. It is the strength of knowing that you don't need the acknowledgement. You know what you did. You know the quality of your effort. You know the truth of your contribution. That is the only validation that survives the night. When you let go of the need for credit, you are no longer in competition with anyone. You are finally free to collaborate, to learn, and to appreciate the contributions of others without feeling that their gain is your loss. You must also learn to cherish the anonymity of the virtuous. There is a hidden, quiet joy in being a person who makes things better without leaving a signature. Think about the people who have had the greatest impact on your life often. They are the quiet ones, the ones who were just there, the ones who taught you, supported you, and showed you the way, without ever needing to be the hero of the story. You have the power to be that person for others. You have the power to weave threads of goodness into the fabric of the world that will continue to benefit people long after your name has been erased. This is a much more powerful and sustainable legacy than any statue, because it is an active, living contribution that propagates itself. The fear of being forgotten is really a fear of having lived a life that was empty. We think that if we are forgotten, it means we didn't exist. But this is a logical fallacy. You existed. You felt the warmth of the sun, the weight of the work, the ache of the love, and the reality of the struggle. That is not a nothing. That is an everything. Your life is not a transaction where you trade your time for a space in a history book. Your life is a sensory, emotional, and cognitive event that has already occurred. You have already won the lottery of existence. The fact that you are currently breathing, thinking, and reading these words is the miracle. To demand that the miracle also be remembered is an act of extreme greed. To sustain this, you must adopt the discipline of the daily erasure. Every night, before you sleep, acknowledge that the day is gone. The successes are gone. The failures are gone. The frustrations are gone. They are not coming back, and they are not being archived. You are starting with a blank slate tomorrow. This practice prevents the accumulation of the ego. It prevents you from becoming heavy with the weight of your own past. It keeps you light, agile, and present. It helps you realize that your life is not a building project that is being stacked floor by floor. It is a series of fires that you light and allow to burn out, one by one. You will find that as you live this way, you become increasingly invisible to the status games of the world. People might stop seeing you as a somebody, but you will start seeing yourself as a somebody, a person of substance, a person of depth, a person of peace. You will stop being a performer for the crowd and start being a practitioner of your own virtue. You will find that the anxiety of the legacy is replaced by the joy of the practice. You will find that you have finally stopped waiting for the world to notice you, and you have finally started enjoying the fact that you are noticing the world. This is a life that is built for the participant, not the spectator. It is a life that is measured not by the reach of your influence, but by the depth of your presence. It is a life that ends in the most beautiful way possible, with the total, peaceful realization that you were here, you saw it, you did it, and that was enough. You don't need a memorial because you were the monument. You don't need to be remembered because you were the experience. You are the architect, the building, and the inhabitant. And in the final analysis, the only thing that matters is that you lived in a way that felt true to the person you actually were. So, walk away from the race for the memorial. Walk away from the desperate need for the stamp of approval from a world that doesn't know its own name. Build your life in the quiet corners of your own conscience. Do the work because it is good. Love the people because they are here. Be present because it is the only thing that is real. And when the time comes for you to leave, leave like the tide quietly, inevitably, and without any need for the shore to remember your name. You were here. That was the gift. And you spent it well. That is all there is to it.